Interesting fact that our next guest shared with me. When the new nutrition guidelines were developed, the midlife age group was somewhat ignored as having different nutritional needs. For many of us, hitting midlife prompted us to reassess things like prioritizing our sleep, changing how we exercise, and examining the impact of our eating habits. I'd always eaten well, but I knew I could do better. But there's so much information out there. There's keto, intermittent fasting, macros, carb to protein ratios, collagen, and all kinds of other supplements. Could just eating better overall be a good, solid strategy? Today's guest went through her own self-assessment because she knew that she too needed to do a wellness overhaul to manage some health issues that were affecting her daily quality of life. Health, wellness, career, family, life, and the better side of 50. I'm your host, Michelle Folan, and this is Asking for a Friend. Our guest today is Maryann Jacobsen. She is a registered dietitian who uses research-based data to help others get the most out of their diets. She's also an author of 6 books on nutrition, including The Family Dinner Solution, and her podcast, The Healthy Family, has a special series on midlife health. And she has a private Facebook group of women over 40 who want to take charge of their health. Welcome, Maryann.
Thanks for having me on.
I'm really glad we were finally able to coordinate our schedules. I know we connected some time back. I'm really glad you're able to be here today. I wanted you to tell the listeners a little bit about you, where you're from, and a little bit about your career path, how being a dietitian has had a personal impact for you.
In college, I wasn't sure what to major in, and my sister was majoring in nutrition, and we both were into working out and changing our diet. And so I followed her footsteps, and I almost freaked out. I thought of majoring in kinesiology. I got really good advice. It's like, keep taking the nutrition classes, and I ended up really loving it. I ended up doing my internship a little later, but the beginning of my career, I worked with adults, and I worked a lot in weight management. And to be honest, I didn't love it. What I discovered was that a lot of the eating issues that people had stemmed really early on, like in their childhood. I felt like sometimes the weight loss got in the way. If they didn't lose weight, they're like, well, what's the use? I don't know. I didn't love that. But then when I had my own kids, along the way, I realized I like to write. And so I decided, since I didn't know a lot about child nutrition, that I'll write about and learn, because I love to learn new things. And I created a website called Raise Healthy Eaters, and I did all this research in starting solids and every stage my kids were at. And it made me realize how important our development, we're always changing. Even after childhood, I focused on that. And then my daughter was going through puberty. At the same time, I was starting to have some changes because I'm a little older mom.
Yeah.
And so I wrote this book for her. It's called My Body Superpower. It's all about how your body changes and how you get these powers, but you don't realize it, and how to take care of your body in a really positive way, because a lot of girls develop a negative body image. And about the same time, I think after this book, I'm going to have to focus on midlife, because I had so many things going on. I had really bad anxiety. My cycles were still regular. I wasn't sure. And when I got online, it was, oh my gosh, as you know, it's all this information, supplements. And then I get on Facebook and these groups would be like, take this, try this diet. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, there is so much. So I started to research, and I thought most of my books take a year or two. Literally, it's been 3.5 years. I'm writing the book now, so it's good. But I would start writing the book and I would just be like, I need to learn more, because the changes that we go through during midlife, they're not just hormonal changes, they're also aging changes. When girls are going through puberty, they're not aging. So it's a little more straightforward. But for us, there's a lot of confusion. Women assume it's their hormones, but it's not always. And I can talk about that. It's really kind of taken on a life of its own. And I created Instagram. I have Midlife Strong, and I'm focusing a little bit more on that these days than childhood nutrition is just kind of where I'm headed. I've discovered so many interesting things that I don't think people are talking about. So I'm excited to share some of that today.
Oh, this is great. I do want to hear about your research and some of the things that you're finding. One thing that you said that resonated with me is that this whole menopause and midlife stuff, it's not all hormones. Is some of it that just your overall gut health, that healthy microbiome that I keep reading about?
That's part of it. It's also, we're more prone to nutrition deficiencies. One in particular that affected me, and it can affect your gut as well, is iron. Because a lot of women start having heavier periods. I had my last kid right before I turned 40. I was always on birth control, and then I just had period after period. And I am also a big exerciser. I was iron deficient, didn't know it because doctors, they only check for anemia. I mean, some doctors will check for iron. I discovered when I finally became anemic, thank God, because then I could go back and realize that I was iron deficient for 5 years. That was why I was tired. That's why I had heart palpitations. That was part of contributing to my anxiety. So that's one example. And there's also other things, oxidative stress, our cells, depending on our habits. We may have always been able to do something and it didn't affect our health, but now, let's say stress, that's a very common one. We may get our exercise and eat balance, but then the way we handle stress, not getting enough sleep, it starts to catch up with us. Our bodies are just not the same. So we think, well, I'm not doing anything different, then why do I feel this way? But we are changing. We need to actually do more, which can be good because we all need to make time to handle stress and for ourselves. And sometimes we're just going and going, and we can do that. We're okay. But then all of a sudden in midlife, we're not okay.
I believe self-care goes way beyond a bubble bath and getting a pedicure. I think self-care at this point in our lives means going to a doctor, finding a really great healthcare advocate. You mentioned getting an iron test. What other blood tests should we be getting at our annual physical?
I'm so passionate about this. I made a biomarker guide, so I have that available if you want to put in the show notes. So it tells you all the common tests, or certain tests they're always going to do, all your liver tests, your metabolic panel. I think it's really important to get a vitamin B12 and always know what that is. It's not a perfect test, but in my guide, I explain if it's a certain level, you want to ask for other tests just to rule out vitamin B deficiency, because as we get older, we don't absorb as much. We might not be making as much stomach acid. I never got checked until I finally asked for it, and I got a better doctor. And then vitamin D is one. Most people hear about vitamin D. I think it's more common, but some doctors won't check it, so it's a good one to ask for. There's other tests, understanding your thyroid markers, what are your triglyceride and HDL. There's a ratio. You can kind of see if maybe you're getting some insulin resistance, which is also common.
Absolutely. The one thing that I am hearing about recently is magnesium deficiency. Is that common?
It actually is very common. Most people don't get enough magnesium in their diet. The problem is there's not really a good biomarker. I mean, you can get your blood levels checked, and if you're really low, it may be low, but it's not really going to tell you. We need better biomarkers for sure. So usually that's one I supplement with. I don't supplement high because I eat a lot of magnesium-rich foods, but I do just in case. I wish there were a biomarker, else I would get it tested. On dietary guidelines, it's always one of the ones that people are falling short.
How do you get more magnesium in your diet? What are good magnesium foods?
Some of the best foods are nuts and seeds and leafy greens.
Okay.
So if someone's not eating any nuts, they're definitely not getting enough magnesium.
Interesting.
And so that's something that can happen if someone's trying to lose weight and they're like, well, those foods are calorie rich. I'm a big proponent of nutrient rich food because I think our needs go up in midlife. And I don't think they've studied it enough, but all my research shows me that we have higher micronutrient needs. Bruce Ames, he's like in his 90s now. He's a researcher. He has this triage theory that he talks about. And then he thinks that when we don't get enough micronutrients. So our metabolism, a lot of the micronutrients, vitamins and minerals are cofactors for different enzymes. And then when we don't get enough, like not the classic deficiency, like beriberi, but when we're just falling short years and years, that our body, it's just like at work. You only do the immediate stuff. Your body's not working on helping you age better. It's just working for survival. He thinks that there's more rapid aging when we don't get adequate micronutrients in our diet. People start feeling, I'm just a little bit tired or not feeling as well. And a lot of times we're missing out on some key nutrients because as a society, we're so focused on our weight and all that stuff that we've kind of missed this nutrition. And that's something I really, in my book, I want to spell out, let women really understand if they're meeting their needs through diet, how do they add supplements? Because I, as a dietitian, like I said, I was low in iron. I wasn't getting enough omega-3. My vitamin D, I've upped it due to new research on COVID-19 in our immune system. I believe higher blood levels are needed. We want optimum nutrition, not just the RDA is just to prevent deficiency for most nutrients. They're kind of outdated, unfortunately. But you also don't want to take too much. So whenever possible, I like to follow my biomarkers. There's a good biomarker for omega-3 called the omega-3 index. And I found that even though I ate fish twice a week and took fish oil, that I was below what was recommended. They have a calculator on OmegaQuant, this website. And I just picked a stronger supplement, a little bit more in my diet, and my levels were above 8, which is what is recommended. Little things like that. Biomarkers are not easy, but you can see the results.
All right. You got me thinking now that next time I go to the doctor, I need to be more specific about what I'm looking for in regard to my blood work. I think this is great advice.
Mm-hmm. And understand the test, because a lot of times, especially with iron, I talk about that. They'll say, oh, it's normal, but it's not. So they'll just follow whatever the lab ranges are. So it's like 20 to like 150. And if you have a 22 and they say, oh, it's normal, it's like, well, you're at the very bottom. And research shows anything under 50 can make you tired, can cause these symptoms, hair loss, anything under 40, hair loss. We have to take charge and we have to be like, no, I think this is a problem.
Ask questions and do your research.
Yep.
You don't always have to take their answer as gold, right?
Yeah.
I like to get questions from listeners and friends. The one big question that I think seems to be a hot topic right now is around protein and how much protein we really need in midlife. What's your thought?
So we do need more protein, and I think it really depends on how much women are getting. So, I mean, some women are getting 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight is really kind of the minimum now. I just listened to a researcher on protein and lean body mass. The RDA is 0.8, and that's really prevent any deficiency state. To help with muscle protein synthesis, we're looking at 1.2 to 1.6. Now, most people, you can calculate that, but for most women, we need between 25 and 30 grams a meal. It's not just protein, it's also leucine. So leucine is a branched chain amino acid. What happens at midlife with aging, if we don't exercise and we're not doing resistance training, we will gradually lose lean body mass. Then menopause comes along and the change in hormones will cause our skeletal muscle to decrease as well. So it's both those things together. Protein really helps. Resistance training is much better than protein as far as keeping skeletal muscle. Protein is important to feed, but that resistance training is really important. And it's also, protein helps with appetite too, especially protein in the morning. Making sure, I think if you look at research, the typical eating pattern is low protein at breakfast, medium protein at lunch, and then a high protein dinner, like you might make chicken, where really that even distribution is most important. We don't necessarily have to count your grams. You just want to make sure you have a good protein source at each meal. And there are certain foods that are high in leucine that you want to bump your protein intake.
And what are those higher in leucine foods?
So the 3-gram leucine, 2 eggs has about a gram of leucine. So you're looking at 3 grams, not necessarily every meal because that may be hard to do. Do a scoop of protein powder. That's 25 grams of protein and 2.5 grams of leucine. And then you're probably getting more from your diet.
I'm just trying to think. There's Greek yogurt. There would be maybe cottage cheese.
Cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, these all have a good amount of leucine. Chicken.
Okay.
And that's something in the book I'll provide more information on leucine. I was listening to Don Layman, who's another protein researcher, and he said pick a couple meals and really try and hit those leucine targets in protein. So I do that at breakfast and lunch. I'll have maybe a protein shake with some oatmeal, and I know I'm getting the leucine there. I might even have chicken too with oatmeal. So 3 ounces of chicken has almost 3 grams. I think it's 2.4.
Okay.
And then at lunch, I'll have some Greek yogurt with my meal or as a dessert. And I usually have a good protein source. So I hit the 3 grams there. Dinner is a smaller meal. I go to bed early. So that for me is something I've focused on at breakfast in particular. I used to eat oatmeal with nuts and milk. It's not like it's 20, 25 grams protein, but I'm not getting enough leucine. I always pretty much work out early morning. Eating protein after the workout and also in the morning can really help build lean body mass. Playing around with it, women can try different things. I don't feel like I have to snack between breakfast and lunch, where before I did. And if I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. I'm not going to be like, I'm not eating.
Right.
Protein, it's a personal thing. Some people like protein shakes and other people don't. If you're a vegetarian, there's different considerations.
I'm not vegetarian, but I use a vegan protein because I like the consistency of it, depending on your taste and the consistency of how you like things. Sometimes I think the whey protein gets too fluffy, has too much air in it or something. I have found a good vegan protein that I like. This is really good advice, and I think loading up on protein in the morning so that 11 o'clock you're not getting that hazy feeling. A segue from talking about protein. Do you believe in taking collagen supplements like the powders?
To be honest, I haven't done a deep dive. There is some research that it can be effective. I think it's for women and it's safe. Yeah, they can try it. I'm going to do a deep dive. I just haven't yet. But I know the research I've looked at show that it can be helpful. And I know just like any of these things, there's individual differences. So I always recommend women, especially women at midlife, if you're trying different supplements, to always just make one change at a time and then wait a few weeks and see if you notice anything. Take collagen, you're taking all these different things. You don't really know how it's affecting you. I think it can be worth it. I have some thoughts on changes during midlife that affect collagen that I can talk about. You can take collagen or you can do something else that I think is probably more important that might help. So I don't know if you want me to talk about that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've discovered, it's not talked about a lot, as we get older and our hormones change, we produce less of a gas called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is responsible for our arteries relaxing and it increases blood flow. So it helps us with our energy, it gets blood flow, gets oxygen and nutrients. If you think about it, little kids have a lot of nitric oxide. They have a ton. As we get older, there's a lot of different reasons why, but our bodies produce less and less. Women are then hit with menopause, but it's over a period of years, transition. And estrogen and progesterone synthesize, help increase nitric oxide. And so nitric oxide increases collagen. One of the things that I recommend is that we work on ways to increase our nitric oxide. And that's something that a lot of women don't know about. It's something I work on, and it's made a huge difference. And it can play a role in our skin. And if you think about it, blood flow is responsible for almost everything to help our cells work well and our mitochondria and energy and all of that.
Hair.
Hair, yep.
Oh, that's interesting. To get more nitric oxide, I've seen those commercials for like Super Beets.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something else in regard to our diet where we can get more nitric oxide?
Half of our nitric oxide comes from our diet, and the other half comes internally from our endothelial cells. Mainly, there's other ways secrete nitric oxide, and that's usually what goes down with age. I think there are ways to increase that I can talk about. Our diet becomes even more important. One of the typical signs is our blood pressure starts to go up, and you're like, I remember my blood pressure used to be 105 or whatever. There's these little signs. We're just more lethargic. our oral bacteria has nitrate reducing bacteria. This is responsible for turning nitrates into nitric oxide. We need to have that bacteria. I don't think the evidence is there for fluoride containing toothpaste. Mouthwash will kill a lot of that bacteria. Leafy greens and beets and celery, those are 3 really good sources of nitrates that get turned into nitric oxide. So you have to take care of the bacteria in your mouth. We hear a lot about the gut, but it really starts in our mouth. They've done tests where they test how much nitrates are in foods, and actually organic produce has less than conventional produce. I've actually started buying spinach just conventionally because I think it probably has more nitrates. I have tried the Super Beets and the Human N, their products, Neo 40, and they do work. I mean, they've done research. If you take that, your blood pressure will lower. I notice a huge increase in energy. I think the only problem is that we don't know the safety of taking that many nitrates concentrated. I still use them before working out. That can be a great thing to take, or beetroot juice you can take before working out. Let's say you're doing a race or going to have one of those days where you want energy. It will work. They've done the studies. They know it. The issue is with the safety. We know real food's always safe, and the people that eat lots of leafy greens and vegetables have better health outcomes. I just recommend don't use mouthwash. I actually use a probiotic toothpaste now, and I've noticed a big difference. We don't have enough research for sure. I think in 10 years, everyone will be talking about this. So yeah, diet. They did one study where midlife women had 2 nitrate-rich salads a day, and they had better blood flow. Their arteries increased. This was for, I think, a few weeks. So definitely midlife women should be adding the greens wherever you can. Your morning breakfast and your eggs. Have that salad. I like to have a salad at lunch. I make a big salad. I love it. I put protein sources, beans, just really nutrient rich, and then just taking care of your oral bacteria. Snacks like celery, adding beets to foods, and then experimenting with some of these supplements, even though the safety long-term is a question.
Okay. Back to the microbiome of your mouth. How about hydrogen peroxide toothpaste?
I don't know.
Because I use one that's got hydrogen peroxide because it keeps my teeth white. Mm-hmm. It's vanity, right, Maryann? Mm-hmm. I'll check on that.
I'll tell you something that really surprised me. I switched to a probiotic toothpaste. I didn't notice anything. I went to the dentist. My teeth were the same. Sometimes my gums, I still have wisdom teeth, right? I stopped taking it when it ran out. It's called Revitin. And I'm like, okay, I'll just use the normal toothpaste. And I noticed I had disrupted sleep for a couple nights. And one of the things with nitric oxide that I've noticed, and there is some research on a lot, it actually helps with your sleep. I think it plays a key role, and they're starting to look at this more in our sleep. We get disrupted sleep at a time that our nitric oxide levels are decreasing. We've got fluctuating hormones. So I went back to the Revitin. Ever since I've switched my toothpaste, my sleep has been so good. And I always sleep well, but you always have that disrupted sleep. This isn't a study. I'm very evidence-based. It's just something to think about. The things we don't know, we take one thing to help with the teeth whitening maybe, or fresh breath. This whole idea of killing bacteria, we know with antibiotics, we don't really want to kill everything, because when we kill bad, we kill good. They're going to look at how we can increase nitrate in our mouth, because that's been really found to be beneficial. I think this whole oral microbiome, I think in 5-10 years, more people will be talking about it for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
This is fascinating. You're hitting all the buttons today. You talked a little bit about sleep and menopause. Are there really any foods that can help with hormone imbalance during menopause?
It's true that our hormones are fluctuating. So if you think about it, there's something called very early perimenopause. So this is before your cycles change. And the medical community does not recognize this stage. But what happens is our egg reserve goes down. Our hypothalamus senses this. And so what happens is we start producing more estrogen to get those eggs out. Research shows we actually produce a little more estrogen. And our progesterone is probably about the same, but sometimes we have a second surge of estrogen in our cycle. When I was having anxiety, I was probably producing more estrogen than I'm used to. And it was probably more erratic because my body's like, hey, there's not as many eggs. We got to get those eggs out. women don't always realize it's called estrogen dominance in the world, but that's not really a medical term. And there's nothing they can do to test for it. But what happens is it just throws things off a little. You can still be fine. And then eventually, when we hit perimenopause, our cycles change 7 days or more. That's the official definition. And then late perimenopause is we've gone 60 days without a period. So that's late. And so when we get in perimenopause, our estrogen is starting to go down, but our progesterone is really going down because we're not always ovulating. All of this together, we're just not used to it. Our hormones do a lot for us. When they start to change, we have to take over. When we get these fluctuations and declines, we're much more likely to be in fight or flight. We're more likely to have that sympathetic nervous system. I'm a big proponent of deep breathing. It wonderfully affects your parasympathetic nervous system. And I started doing these meditations without even knowing it. And I was doing deep breathing for 20 minutes. And I was like, oh gosh, this is annoying. But then afterwards, I felt amazing. Now I just do deep breathing. I don't even do the regular meditations anymore. Like I said, eating more nitrates, it's going to help take over the fact that our declining hormones, we don't have as much nitric oxide. So when we eat these greens and we eat these nitrate-rich foods, it gives us something that we're missing. So the idea everywhere is, let's just replace these hormones. And you can, and some women really need to, and I think it's safe and fine. But I look at it as more like, how do we take over the job of the hormones? Also, our nutrient needs change, like B12. Choline is another one that I think we need more of. Also supplement, because I don't think we can meet all our needs through our diet alone, unless it's a full-time job.
How do you get choline?
Choline is in animal products, and it's in eggs and chicken and fish and animal foods. It's just one of those latest dietary guidelines. Most people, they're getting like half of what's recommended. When we go through menopause, estrogen helps stimulate acetylcholine. And so when we don't have as much estrogen, we still make estrogen after menopause, but we don't have that helper. Choline affects things like brain fog and our brain health. The choline is tricky, so that's a good one to try and get more from your diet. Eggs are a really good source.
Okay. I got that down because I eat a lot of eggs.
Yeah.
It's just such an easy thing to make. I mean, I eat eggs for lunch all the time, too.
I love eggs, yeah.
I had 2 questions here from listeners. Is keto worth it? What are your thoughts about keto?
The benefit of keto, so any diet has benefit, is that it's called metabolic switching. Being able to go into ketosis can help us. There can be some benefits to that. Ultimately, it's usually a calorie reduction that helps you to lose weight. So it depends on why someone's doing keto. My guess is for weight loss, right?
Oh, sure.
One of the problems is with weight loss when we get older is that we don't just lose body fat, we lose skeletal muscle, something we're already at risk of. Not only that, we can lose some bone mass too. If you just follow keto and you're not doing resistance training, you're not doing higher protein, you're going to lose lean body mass, okay? If you go back and gain the weight because that diet's not...
It's not sustainable, I don't think.
Yeah. It's harder to follow. I mean, unless you love it. When you go back to gain weight, people are like, oh, I'm back at the same weight. I'm the same, but you're not. So what happens when we lose lean body mass, we gain fat back quicker. We end up with more body fat than when we started. It's a process called collateral fattening. After the age of 60, we don't regain the lean body mass. Our body composition ends up being worse. You can lose weight, but I think there are much healthier ways. And I think if you've gained weight and you feel like you're not at the right weight, try and figure out why. Is that stress? If you can figure out why, then you can tackle that issue, and that probably will help. Versus just following a diet doesn't really get at what is it. I'm a big proponent of food regulation. It takes all these different things to regulate our food. It's how much we eat, it's what we eat, it's our stress, it's our sleep. There's physical activity, of course, our body composition. So I'm a big proponent of looking at the why behind your weight. And it's not as sexy. Our health is number one at midlife, right? And I know that women feel this way. Yeah, they may want to lose weight, but they really want to be healthy. Studies show if you lose weight by exercise, which, a lot of the research shows you don't because people tend to compensate and they eat more. It's like, I'm exercising. In some studies, they do lose weight. When you lose weight with physical activity, you don't lose any lean body mass. You only lose fat. I'll use an example of myself. I was gaining weight. This was several years ago, really gradual. I don't weigh myself at home, but at the doctor. It ended up being like close to 10 pounds. It's like, what has changed? I'm doing the same things. And I realized I stopped working at a hospital. Anyone that works at a hospital know you move around a ton. I wouldn't count my steps, but it'd be like, I'm sure 20,000 steps 2 to 3 times a week. And I always exercise. I was like, you know what? I'm working from home, sitting all day. I do my exercise. I'm going to start taking walks. I just started walking during breaks. And it's funny because that's such a simple thing, right? Just to walk. Over a year later at the doctor, because I don't weigh myself, I just kind of settled right back down to where it was before, my weight. And so if I would have went on keto, I probably would have lost weight fast. I would have lost lean body mass. I probably would have gained it back because it's not sustainable. It would have just messed with me. We get emotional because weight can be really emotional. We want to notice if we've gained weight. My weight is higher than when I was in my 20s. I don't think there's anything wrong. My metabolic health. So we are going to gain some weight, and research shows from midlife on that can be protective, especially if we're healthy. Keto, it's going to be low in nutrients. Like I said, all the popular diets are missing key nutrients. You can supplement. It's not the same. Of course, there's always someone that maybe it works well for.
Right. Well, there's intermittent fasting, which you're not really restricting your calories, but you're just getting your calories at a different time of the day, right?
I'm just doing a research on that right now. Pretty much it's the same as restricted. If you restrict your calories, intermittent fasting, there's nothing special, but it just may work for some people better. If they lose weight, it's usually because the fasting helped them to cut some calories. One of the watch outs that I personally don't like is that most people skip breakfast because that's the easiest. It's much harder to stop eating at 4. There is benefits to breakfast because that's when we metabolize glucose much better. We're eating later and it might affect our ability to metabolize glucose. And I've tried it for just health, like 1 day a week, and I've just never been able to feel good or get past that, not eating breakfast. I can't do it. The research is most of the benefits, the metabolic benefits are in animals. It's hard if people are losing weight when they do studies to say, is it the fasting? Or is it the weight loss? It's not even just weight loss. It's that they're eating so much less and that decreases insulin. And they don't really know for sure if you're getting all these advantages that we hear about. There's some suggestive evidence that it decreases inflammatory markers. Probably a more easy approach is just to try and have dinner not too late and not eat at night. Get that window of fasting like up to 12 hours. Dinner's over at 7. You eat the next day at 7.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really a easier way. That's with your circadian rhythm, not eating too late at night when we don't metabolize glucose as well. And it all makes sense because you're going to bed, right? Why would you eat? I just had to talk to my teen about this and she came home with a meal and I'm like, the next day I'm like, you're just going to bed. So, I mean,
yeah,
it makes sense that we're eating more during our busy day. And then when we like kind of coming down, eating late at night. And studies show that it's just much better to have food earlier in the day. And some people love intermittent fasting if it's worked for them. There's always individual differences.
Yeah.
You always have to keep that in mind.
My issue is that when your husband gets out the bag of Fritos at 9:30 at night, that's really tempting because they look really good. So it takes me a lot of self-control not to eat after dinner. So that's my issue.
We haven't talked about mindful eating. I changed this in my 20s because I used to just mindlessly eat all day. During my internship, I didn't have access to food, so I ate all my meals at the hospital across the street. And I realized this is much better. I focus, I eat, and then I go do my stuff, and then I'm hungry, and then I go eat again. One of the things that they notice is when mindlessly eating, we don't remember it. If you're eating while doing other things, you don't have as much meal memory. So when you go to eat later, you actually may end up eating more and it can dysregulate you. If you want to help yourself get enough food for your body type, eating at the table and just always being mindful and enjoying your food. Of course, you're watching a movie with your family, you have popcorn. It's really what you're doing most of the time. That mindful eating really can be helpful in regulating your food intake. I stopped eating at night a long time ago, but I used to do it for sure.
I try. I've got a husband that's a snacker, so I just tell him to go eat somewhere else. I did want to ask you, when you go to the grocery store, what are the 3 or 4 things that are always, always, always in your shopping cart?
When I go to the grocery store, I always get leafy greens, kale, spinach. My husband does go to Costco. So he gets milk. I always get nuts. I really love nuts.
What kind of nuts do you think are the best?
I get them all: walnuts, mixed nuts, almonds, cashews, and I also always have chocolate. So I usually get, because I don't want people to think I'm this perfect.
Maryann's no fun.
I know, they're like, I hate her. Dark chocolate, not even the super dark. It's like sea salt, or the dark chocolate covered peanut butter at Trader Joe's. After lunch, I always have something sweet. I always liked sweet foods. I grew up in a big family where if you didn't get ice cream, I just would shovel it down. So that was something that I was in my 20s, I really struggled with. How do I eat these foods? And then I realized I don't have to overeat them. I can be mindful. And then I started getting really picky. What do I really enjoy? Because I would just eat anything sweet. But now there's chocolate. I do like ice cream sometimes. It can be in my fridge, in my freezer, and I'm totally fine, where that wasn't the case before. I really encourage, what you resist persists, but what you embrace gets erased. Really embrace it. You like sweets, you should enjoy them, but how can you do that in a sensible way where you get your cravings met? And that's what I found. I don't really struggle at all with that. So it's made a lot of this stuff that I learned about midlife, it's just not that hard for me to make changes because I already feel like I have a healthy relationship with food. But if you don't, that might be something you work on. And that's something in the book I'll talk about: how to eat, what to eat, and also when to eat. It's not just one thing.
Right. I think this is a great segue into, so you're writing the book, which that's very exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing that. How else can people get a hold of you?
MaryanJacobsen.com, SEN. You can go there and sign up for I send a Monday message every week on midlife health. It might be a book I like. It might be just a new study that I found interesting. It's something I'm writing about in the book. If they want to sign up, then you'll get my free biomarker guide so that when you go to your doctor, you're kind of prepared. And then I have at midlife.strong on Instagram. I also have a private Midlife Strong Facebook page. I'm just trying to talk to as many midlife women, so when the time comes, I can also get some stories for the book, since I don't really work one-on-one with women. The book is more of what to expect. It's broad. It's not just about nutrition. We need something like that. In pregnancy, women get that. But we don't really have anything for midlife. It's mostly menopause, which is fine. That can help you. By the time a woman reaches menopause, she's 51 on average. So most of these things start around 40. I think if more women were prepared, then I think menopause would be smoother for them, for sure.
I think so. We all get to that point in our life where we're like, I need to do better, and I know I can do better for myself.
Most of us have been focusing on taking care of others. It's time to focus on you and make yourself known.
Exactly. And that's why I'm doing this podcast, Maryann.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was super informative. I think I got more information than I thought I would. And I'm going to have a ton of information for the show notes as well. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Follow Asking for a Friend on social media outlets and provide a review and share this show wherever you get your podcasts. Reviews and sharing help us grow.